One day, the Prophet ﷺ, he himself saw a dream. And when the Prophets see a dream, it's absolutely true from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No doubt. They either see from Allah or nothing. Different to us. And he said, Atani atini al-layla. Last night, someone came to me in my dreams, meaning angels. They came to me too. And they took me into the skies, into the life of the Barhzik, into another world of the dead, the world of the dead. He said, we reached a place. I saw before me a man who was lying down on the floor, on his back. And there was another man, a big man holding a huge stone. He would come up to this man lying on the floor and he'd throw the stone onto his head. And it'd crush his head. And the stone would roll away. The man would go to pick up the stone, and by the time he comes back to the person on the ground, his head has been restored. And he'd crush it again. The stone would roll away. And he'd keep doing that over and over. So I asked them, who is this man on the floor, and why is that other man doing this to him? They said to me, move on, move on. Don't ask questions, keep going. He said, then we moved on. Then we passed by a man who had a hook, a brass hook in the front of his hands. Or actually a man who was sitting down. And there was another man behind him who had a brass hook. And he would place the hook on the front of his face from his mouth. And he would rip his mouth and eyes and half of the face to his ear. Then he would come to the other side of his face and rip his other side of his face to the other ear. When he'd go to the other side, the first side is restored. Then he'd do the same to the restored side, and then the other side is restored. And then he'd do it again. And he'd keep on doing that over and over again. Prophet ﷺ asked, who is this person and why is that other man doing this to him? They said, move on, move on. He said, I reached a man who was swimming in a lake which looked like blood. And there was another man on the edge. He had stones in his hands. The man would swim to the other man. The other man would put stones into his mouth and he would have to swallow them and carry them across. And he would bring them out on the other side and he would come back, swim back, take another stone, put it on the other side and continuously do that. He said, why is this man doing this and who is the other man? He said, move on. They said, move on, move on. He said, we reached a place. He said, I saw men and women who were naked inside of what looked like a tannoor. Tannoor is like, in the olden days, this oven. They used to use these ovens to bake in their bread and stuff. Tannoor is very deep and hollow, and it has fire underneath it, very hot in there. He said, I saw men and women in a huge tannoor, huge, as much as the eye could see. And they were hanging in there, and the fire would burn from underneath and burn them, and they would all scream, and the fire would come back. Then it would burn them, and they'd all scream and come back. He said, who are these people and why is this happening to them? They said, move on, move on. He said, I reached and saw a man so tall that I could look up and I could barely see his face. But he was beautiful. He had a white beard. And around him were children. Lots and lots of children. In a beautiful garden. He said, who is this and who are these children? They said, move on, move on. He said, we moved on. And I saw a group of people, a group of men and women, people. One side of their body, of their face, was the most handsomest and beautiful that I've ever seen. And the other side of their face and body was the most gruesome and ugliest I've ever seen. Then they'd walk to a river and they'd bathe in it, and then the side that was ugly was restored to be as beautiful as the other side. And so they were completely beautiful as I've ever seen. I asked, who are these people and why is this happening to them? The angel said, move on, move on. He said, I came to a man, big man, and his face was the most hideous and ugliest I have ever laid eyes on. And he didn't smile. I asked, who is this person? And they said, move on,